How is everyone doing tonight, relatively?
It's a good escape from the news.
I happen to know that this is Alyssa's probably favorite topic on earth. So I'm really excited to hear from her and kind of like lift my spirits this evening.
You see, if I was doing it from the office, I could have my physical representations of things.
Specimens.
Yes.
Give it probably just maybe another minute and a half.
Oh, there I am.
And so, Alyssa, this is a bit of a larger group. Would you prefer that everybody kind of hold their questions or put them in the chat?
So we're actually going to use the chat today. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you are on a computer and have the ability to use the chat function or on your phone and can use the chat, that would be great because we don't seem to have the polling option on the Zoom account. So I'd like to be able to do some kind of interactive portions and have you guys kind of put your input into some things. After each section, I'll stop for questions and we can use the chat for that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So with that, we seem to have slowed. Oh, just as I say that. On the people coming in here. So we can probably just get started and I'll let people in as they come. But again, hi to everyone that's just joining us and welcome to T-Town's online programming and the next installment of our now sort of long running Backyard Wildlife series. Tonight, we will be learning about tracks and traces with Alyssa, who we did just mention. This is one of her favorite topics in the world. So we know how knowledgeable she is on that topic and I'm really looking forward to it. And again, thank you all for tearing yourselves away from the news for a little while tonight for something just a little bit more relaxing and exciting and interesting here with us this evening. Just before we get started, I do want to mention that we will have another one at the same time, same place in just 2 weeks on January 20th, another important day. And that we will be having our senior educator, Maggie Pachura, joining us to teach us about winter birding and winter birds and what to look for, what characteristics, how to identifying them, what's going on this time of year. So that should be exciting as well. And here we have another person joining us. So I guess without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Alyssa, and look forward to your presentation. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. We're going to talk about tracks and traces. Excuse my dry throat. I've been in class all week wearing a mask and my throat is killing me. So as we go through the day again, I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have the chat function available, just pop that box open if you're on a computer, and I'll be asking some questions and looking for some input. If you don't have it available, that's more than okay. This is just a way I can get some kind of feedback from you guys, which is more my teaching style when in person. And unfortunately, we can't do in person right now. So like Nadia said, this is a topic that I really enjoy. I could talk for hours on this, but I will refrain from that. I do have a pretty long slide deck. So if I am going too fast, I do apologize, but I want to get through a lot of stuff. There's a lot to learn about tracks and traces. A lot of times we think of tracks as just the footprint left in the mud or the snow, but there's so much more to it, including my favorite kind of track or trace. So we'll get started with that. And let me see. Excuse my technology. Let's see. There we go. All right. Up, that's covering my thing there. Okay, so let's get started with tracks and traces. So this is a familiar photo to my father, who I believe is on this call. Just the other day, I was over my parents' house and my brother had told me that he was hearing sounds from the upstairs, and I thought the upstairs was as far as you could go in my house, or my parents' house that I grew up in and lived in for like 30 years. But apparently there's a crawl space. Who would have known? And so I popped myself into that crawl space, and this is what I found up there. So let me see if I can do this. Again, bear with me with technology. Oops, no, go back. All right. So, no, 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 no. Where is, oh, it's down there. That's why. There we go. So this over here, you can see is a burrowing tunnel through the fiberglass insulation. We've got some poop right here. And then we've got these shells of probably some kind of seed that are littering all over here. So based off of this and the other evidence I found, I could pretty confidently say that there's a mouse problem up there. Not too bad of a mouse infestation, luckily, but there are mice in the crawl space. So why is it important? Well, it tells us who's been there, where, when they've been there, and are they healthy? And maybe what they've eaten. A lot of things we can learn from these signs. It's kind of like being a detective or reading what's around you, and you could really experience nature at a different level when you're going on a hike, when you start looking for things like this. So what are we looking for when we say tracks and traces? What are we talking about? Well, tracks is the big one that everyone looks for. There's also chews, bones, scat or poop, pellets, feathers, fur, digs, burrows, and dens, food scraps, eggs, nests, slides, galls, holes, sheds and molts, and rubs, just to name a few. So there's a lot of stuff that we're looking for in the forest or in whatever habitat you're walking through that can really enhance your experience out in nature. Good question. What are galls? We'll talk about galls in a little bit. That'll come up later on. So let's talk about the big one, tracks. Tracks now in the wintertime when we get frozen ground or thawing frozen ground, we can get some really good tracks now. We can get some good tracks in the snow. Typically, the tracks in the summer aren't as good, but you can still find it in the mud. So how do we identify the tracks? It seems daunting. First, we want to look at the type of track it is. So is it a bird track? Is it a hooved mammal? Or is it a paw track? So we're going to look at the type. We're going to look at the size of the general track, the number of appendages or toes. That's very, very important. The gait or the way that the tracks are spread out is important. The spacing, measuring the spacing between tracks, and its location. We don't think of location as much, but if you find tracks on a trail, that's important. If you find tracks that are going from tree to tree, that's also very important. So we want to look at the different location that the tracks are found. So here we have a very easy one. I'd like everyone to chime in on the chat. What do you think left these tracks?
Bird.
I got one bird. Anyone else want to chime in? A pigeon? Bird. Bird. Very good. All right. I think we've all decided it's a bird. So we've got our 3 toes here and our 1 toe in the back, like almost like a trident look, right? This is very typical of a bird that walks, similar like a pigeon or a songbird. So we have that. Let's see. Okay. Trying to multitask with technology here. There we go. All right. So now what do you think this is?
A duck?
Duck. We have a couple ducks, duck or goose. So we could see we have 3 appendages here, and we have some webbing that goes around. So you're right. This is a duck or a goose, some kind of waterfowl. Very distinct. Can't really mistake it for anything. You would look at the size to kind of judge what species it might come from. Obviously, a goose or a swan is going to be bigger than a duck. Ducks come in many sizes too. So you might have a smaller duck like a bufflehead or a larger duck like our common mallard. So now let's go to some mammals. This is a very, very common. Oh, deer, deer. Oh, deer. Lots of deer. So I'm sure a lot of people have seen this track. It is our only hoofed mammal, right? So we have the hoof here that goes down. In what direction is it going? It's moving in this direction. So as we look at deer tracks, we can actually tell the direction that they're traveling and kind of follow their tracks. The deer, as they plunge their hoof down into the snow, they're going to make a deeper indent in the front end, and that's the direction of travel. So deer, again, very common, not really mistakable for anything else. Now it's where we're going to get a little more difficult. So what do you think this is?
Bear.
Ooh, bear, good guess. Raccoon, cat, coyote. Ooh, I like this. Okay. So we're getting a whole bunch of different answers. So what I'm looking at here, dog, coyote, I'm looking for this nice defined X right here. So I have this nice X. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 toes. And I have this funny shaped pad. Kind of looks like a Hershey Kiss that's been melted a little at the bottom. And then I have these claw marks. This picture doesn't really do it really good justice, but there are some claw marks here. So the claw marks being very well defined tells me more likely it's going to be a wild animal versus a domestic animal. Although you can find claw marks on a domestic animal, but we tend to groom our animals and make sure that they get their pedicures. So often you won't find as well-defined claw marks. This X that you see, I look for it when I'm looking at a coyote track. So this is a coyote track. This is the front paw of a coyote. And you're going to see it's about 2 to 3.5 inches in length. So it's a pretty decent size. You can confuse it with something like a German Shepherd type dog or a larger breed of dog, but I'll show you in just a second the difference between a domesticated dog and the coyote. So let's see. All right. So if that was the coyote, oops, this is our dog. Let's go back. So this is our domesticated dog. This dog has some long claws. Usually you don't see that, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 4 appendages. And we have the same kind of weird Hershey Kiss type pad. Now, what you might notice is that the space between each of the paws is a little more wide. There's a little more space between the toes, whereas the coyote is very, very close. And then where I was able to draw an X through the coyote, it's a little harder to here. This looks more like a weird H, like a bubble H, kind of if I was making a bubble letter H when I was in first grade. So I'm looking for that shape in the middle. Yep, I'm going to show you the coyote again. I'll show you it side by side so you can see it next to each other. But these are the things I'm looking for in a domesticated dog. Obviously, if you see something that looks canine and it's small, it's probably one of the smaller breeds of domestic dogs. But we do have fox around here. Fox are similar, but again, their toes are gonna be closer together than the coyote. So here on the left-hand side, we have the domesticated dog, and here on the right, you have your coyote. So you could see the paw pads, the toe pads are a little more spread out. And if we take my little trick of, oh, where's my pen? It is very similar. You're right. It is kind of hard. If we take our pen, here's my weird bubble H, and with the coyote, I can draw the X through it. That's my quick kind of ID when I'm in the field. So now this one here, this one's fun. Who knows what this is? Raccoon, raccoon.
Like something like that. One of the smaller.
Raccoon, a lot of raccoons. Opossum, beaver. All good guesses.
Mhm.
I like this. All right. Wolf. If we take a look here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 toes. And you can sort of see by the shape, there's kind of an outline to it, right? Sort of like what we saw in the mallard duck. This is webbed feet. So this is webbed feet of a mammal. And this particular mammal is found by the water. You can see by the environment it's in, this muddy area, and it also because of its webbing. So this is actually an otter. This is a river otter. Usually when you find river otter tracks, you might also find a slide where they lay on their belly and push themselves forward, and you get this kind of S-shaped slide in the mud or the snow. And so you can look for that as a track as well. It doesn't just have to be their feet that you find. So otters are very cool. We'll talk about weasels again. Weasels are cool. All right. What do we think this is? Raccoon, raccoon, looks kind of humanish.
Yeah, it does. It looks like somebody on the other side of a thing, a snow thing, a mirror, not a mirror.
It does, right? It looks like
A window trying to get
very,
in.
very tiny hands. A ghost, yeah.
Yeah, it's spooky.
Raccoon, raccoon. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 fingers that they are, these toes are kind of close together. And you could see there's an oval like shape palm here that is pretty much connected. This is going to be 2 to 3 inches in length. And you guys are right. This is a raccoon. So raccoons are very dexterous, and they use their fingers to get into our trash bins. All right, so if that's a raccoon, who is this? This, by the way, is my favorite track to find. Possum. This actually came up on either the Nature of Westchester page or in one of the other tracking pages that I'm on Facebook. This came up recently. Mole, possum, opossum. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what's interesting about this is that you have 2 sets of tracks here. You've got this one back here shows it a little better. You've got one, and you've got a second one that's a little different. And I want you to take a look at this back one and this appendage right here. It's offset from the others. So you have the 5 toes here, but in the hind one, this toe is separate from the other toes. So this is an opposable thumb. Like our thumb is offset from the rest of our fingers. This opposable thumb allows the animal to grab or to grasp. You're right, this is an opossum. Opossums, their rear leg has an opposable thumb. So this is the front followed by the rear. And they walk almost like they're walking on a tightrope. So you can see them kind of moving like this right across. Again, one of my favorite tracks to find. I think they're adorable. Okay. How about this guy? Oops. Oh no. Go back. There we go. Deer, mouse, mouse. Mouse. It's very small. So we have a very small track. We've got 2 indents and a straight line. So you're right, this is a mouse. So the straight line here is the tail dragging on the snow. You'll often find these tracks like going over a log, or you'll find them going into a burrow or a hole in the snow. So you can tell by kind of their size, but also their location, that this is a mouse. All right. So this is the same track. I wanted to show you this view because we have a directional one here, a pattern, and then this is the close-up. So a couple rabbits. My question with the rabbit is, why is it going to a tree and back? Squirrel. Squirrel. Yeah. So this is a squirrel. The squirrel tracks are going to come in these little pairs right here. Oops. Oh no. Technology. So they're going to come in pairs. And if we look on the close-up, these 2 are actually the hind legs, and these are the front. So when you watch a squirrel bound, it's sort of like a rabbit as well. They'll swing their hind legs forward. And so their hind legs are going to appear before their front legs in a track. And it's very common to have them going to and from a tree. They're going to go to the tree and then climb up a tree, or they'll go away from the tree. And you'll see in fresh snow a whole bunch of tracks just going from tree to tree to tree to tree. Very common of squirrel tracks. In comparison, these are your rabbit tracks. So rabbit tracks, the hind 2 feet are leading, but look at the front feet. They're not like a squirrel, which you have the front and then the rear like this. Their pattern's different. You can see that the front feet are in a line with one another, not horizontally next to each other. And so this is a rabbit. You can tell the huge hind legs versus the smaller front legs. These rabbits have big feet to help them, kind of like snowshoes, stay above the snow. So that's the big difference between rabbits and squirrels. Squirrels are a little bigger, or a little smaller, sorry, as well. And then finally, what happened here? So we have a couple tracks here, a couple things happening. This tells a story. This brings it all together. So we have some tracks going around this way. We have some tracks here. We have a track here. We have some fallen snow over here, nothing really. And then we have something that happened right here in the center. Ooh, vulture or hawk kill? Looks like there's some deep snow here. Deep pits. Maybe a bird feeder's over there that someone's been walking around. Hawk and prey. Yeah, this is some kind of animal that was hopping around, maybe a squirrel. And this right here, these are wing prints. So this is the wing print of a bird or two that have come down and taken its food. I wouldn't quite say owl just because of how defined these feathers are. This is more like something like a hawk. An owl, you might have a more rounded kind of feel to it, a softer feel. So my guess would be closer to a hawk, just judging by how finger-like these wings are. So this is why we look at tracks too. It can tell us the story, not just who's been here, how long ago, whatever. It tells us a story about what happened. What happened that we don't see, we don't get to see. We're not a witness to the event, but we can kind of tell what happened. It's almost a storybook that nature's telling us. So this is why I love looking at tracks in the wintertime. It brings the story to life. So now let's move on from tracks. Now we have chew marks and rubs. So here's an easy one. What is this? A beaver, yeah. Anyone who's walked around Teatown Lake or Shadow Lake or Vernay Lake anytime recently has noticed there's a lot of beaver chews. You can tell a beaver chew by most other chews because it's going to look like a spear sticking out of the snow of the tree trunk. So it's going to look like a spear, and you're going to see the individual teeth marks of the beaver. So beavers are rodents. They have these two incisors that are the front of their teeth, and they keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And these growing teeth need to be filed back. Otherwise, if they get too long, they can't open their mouth. So they gnaw on wood. And this gnawing action is what we see here. They also use the wood. They're one of the few rodents that will use the wood that they're gnawing on. So they're going to use the wood not only for food, they eat the living part of the tree, this green part, the cambium layer, but they also use it to build with. And that's what we typically recognize beaver chews as. They're taking the trees down to build. They're one of the few animals that change their environment to meet their own needs. So very special. How many beavers are there at Teatown? We don't know. There are a lot. We have them on all three of our lakes. All right, what happened here? or who was here.
Yeah.
We have some damage here, some damage here. Oops. Buck, deer rub,
Yeah.
bear, woodpecker. All good, all good. So what's interesting about a bear is occasionally you'll see the scratch marks from a bear, but usually if they're trying to get into something. So again, at my parents' house, I wish I had the picture with me. We had a bear take down our fence to get to our bird feeder. And not only did he bend the metal bird feeder rod and get to our bird food, but he left a very nice claw mark on the wood of the fence. So it's very distinct. This is more kind of general. It looks like over maybe some time that this happened, or it's not just one event where it got clawed at once. So this is a buck rub. But deer and the male deer bucks will grow antlers every year. Antlers are different from horns in that they shed. So horns never shed, they just grow. Whereas an antler will shed off, and as a new one grows, it grows with this velvety stuff on it. And this velvety stuff gets very itchy and uncomfortable, and they rub against a tree to kind of get it off and shed that off. And so you'll see these buck rubs on trees. Hunters look for these, especially when they're out. Oops, that didn't clear. Let's see. Clear. All right. All right, this is fairly easy. Extra points if you could tell me which specific species did this. Woodpecker. It is a woodpecker. Pileated, bingo. This is a pileated woodpecker. So pileated woodpeckers will not only have pretty big holes that they make, but they're in a rectangular shape. So all the pileated holes are in this rectangular shape. And what are they after? Why do woodpeckers make these holes? Bugs, yeah. They're after the insects and the grubs, the larvae that make their home inside dead wood. And so they're pecking at it in order to get to their food source. It's not so that they can make a hole to live in, but it's to get to their food. How about these holes? These holes are interesting. They're kind of in a line going across. Sapsucker, yes. This is from a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Not only is it a fun word to say, but the yellow-bellied sapsucker is a beautiful woodpecker, and it comes and sucks up the sap. Does it eat the sap? No. It's after the bugs, just like any other woodpecker. The sap attracts the bugs, and with the sap comes the bugs that are attracted to it. So this is from a yellow-bellied sapsucker. If you see this on a tree, the sapsucker has just gone right across. Sometimes you'll find a whole tree just covered in these holes. There's one actually in the center of Hidden Valley. If you go, if you're getting on Hidden Valley into the meadow, and there's an apple tree to the left-hand side as you enter the center of the meadow, and it's covered in sapsucker holes. I'll let you think about this one. Do they ever go to bird feeders? I'm not sure. I've never seen one at a bird feeder before. I've never seen it on suet either. So that would be maybe a question for Maggie in 2 weeks. What made these? Is this a good sign? So a lot of my camp kids find this out in the woods and they're like, oh, it's like Native American carvings. and they love seeing this. I love it as a photographer. This is so cool to photograph the different designs you can find. But Gloria is right. This comes from beetles, and more specifically, a lot of times the larva. But in this case, this comes from the ash borer, the emerald ash borer, which is not good to find. So sometimes it comes from a naturally occurring beetle or a burrowing insect, or their larva. And sometimes it's from an invasive species that is doing damage. Very hard to tell. So this tree is obviously dead at this point. What about this? Yeah, caterpillar, some kind of caterpillar, most likely a small kind of inchworm that did this damage. But this is what we walk past in the forest a lot of times, just chewed up leaves, right? Who stops and takes a look at the chewed up leaves? I do during the summertime. I'm looking for the cocooned moth caterpillars. And oh, great, someone else does too. It's amazing. This is the stuff that a lot of people pass by. So this tells me that there has been caterpillar activity, and depending on how fresh the edges look, you might have caterpillars. You might find that they've rolled up the leaves and made a cocoon already. So this is a sign that most likely it's an inchworm, which is a type of moth. It's a little hard to see. We're looking, oops. Oh, no, go back. We are looking right. I love and hate technology. There we go. We're looking right here. This is an antler, but something happened to this antler. So do you see these chew marks? It could be a mouse chew, although these teeth look a little too big to be a mouse. My guess is something more like a squirrel. But you're right, as far as it's a rodent, right? Just like the beaver, we have the incisors that have this gnawing action. And this is most likely a squirrel. And they'll chew on the antler for the extra minerals that they can get for it. And also the, why would a rodent chew this? They get extra minerals from it. And they help gnaw down their incisors. So this is a good hard thing so that they can file down their teeth, but also it does give them something. They do get something out of it. And now my favorite topic, poop. Let's talk about poop. Disclaimer, there are pictures of poop. This is scat, is another word for poop. And we like to call it a more scientific word, but it's still poop. So how we identify it. Whenever I go hiking, I always carry at least two things with me, a ruler and a collection jar. And so I like to collect scat. Unfortunately, I am not in my office. Otherwise, I'd show you my lacquered scat collection, but I do have a collection of scat, and I am well known for it. So my coworkers sometimes leave me presents on my desk. And I have one coworker from another job that I have who every time he texts me, it's usually a scat picture. So we're looking for the shape, the general size. What's very important now is consistency in the contents and its location. Again, starting off easy. What do we have here? I hope everyone has seen this. Yes, it is bird. It is generally a bird. Very hard to determine between the birds. I've seen a little kestrel make a big pile of poop the same size as what came out of my hawk. So it's very hard to determine what type of bird, but this is from generally a bird. a flying bird as it has splattered. How about this? I stepped in some today. I was not happy. Goose, yeah. I'm sure anyone who has walked in a park has seen goose poop. So this is goose. It is tubular and it's usually got some kind of fibers in it. And these fibers are from the grass that they eat. Sometimes this white color here could be urates. Birds poop and pee from the same place, from their cloaca. So these could be the urates, or it could be bleached from the sun. So sometimes when poop is out for a very long time, it will get bleached and change color. Sometimes the goose poop will be bright green, and that's just from the stuff that they're eating, right? Poop tells you a lot about what is going on in the digestive system and what they've been eating. So it could be that they've eaten a lot of grass, a lot of algae, and that's what's coming out. All right, the clue to this one is this is zoomed in pretty tight, and there are some things around it, some debris. So we have mouse,
Deer?
deer. So they are pelleted. Squirrel. So what this reminds me of, I have guinea pigs at home. It reminds me of a guinea pig poop. And all these answers, mouse, squirrel, beaver, deer, they're all pretty good as far as it's an herbivore. So herbivores make these kind of rounded pellet-like poops. Rabbit's also a good guess. Rabbit are more spherical. These are more pelleted. And the big clue are these nutshells. This is squirrel poop. What about these? I hope people have seen, oops, no, go back. I hope people have seen this before. Yeah, deer. Are they both deer? There are two pictures here. Are they both deer? These are clearly defined circular pellets. And this is kind of all mushed together. I think they look more like Raisinets or what are the Cocoa Puffs? So Ubers, yeah, or goobers, right? So these are both deer, and this is winter, and this is summer. So again, poop will change based off of what the animal is eating. And in the winter, deer are eating things like the bark off of trees and nuts off of the ground and small plants that are sapling branches. Whereas in the summer, they're going to be eating more grass and more fresh leaves. So their poop is going to be less pelleted and kind of more smushed together. So sometimes the poop does change. A lot of times the summer deer poop gets mistaken for bear poop a lot. Bear poop will not have these defined pellets though, that are kind of smushed together. Almost like someone melted those goobers. All right. What do we have here? Bear, coyote, coyote, coyote. Right. So we have 3 distinct sections. Usually animals that poop in these 3 tubular sections are some kind of canine. And this one over here, it comes off my screen, but it kind of tapers off. So you have 3 sections, one that tapers off here, very indicative of a canine. What gives this away is its size. This is a pretty large piece. You can't really tell by the picture, but look at the fur that's in there.
Mhm.
This is not fine fur like squirrel fur. This is coarse hair. This is deer fur. So now, why is looking at scat important? Well, about 50 years ago, the coyote were not eating as many deer as they are now. Today, 95% of their winter diet is made up of deer, and researchers found this out by looking at the scat. They used to have about 10% their summer diet. Now I think it's closer to 40% of their summer diet is deer. So definitely they're relying on the deer and taking advantage of there being so many. Mostly they scavenge it, but they can also hunt the deer. Not as successfully as a wolf though. So what do we have here? We've got the 3 sections tapered off at the end. Dog. A big pet peeve of mine. Stepping in this.
It's good luck.
Oh, I wish it were. Not when I'm bleaching my shoe off and scrubbing everything. So it's tubular like the coyote. It tapers off, but it's uniform. What do we feed our dogs? Commercial dog food. And so whenever you find something large and in kind of this shape of the 3 pieces and the tapered off end, and it's all uniform, there's no fur or bone bits in it, this is a domesticated dog. Someone did not pick up after their dog. What gets me is even more is when people pick up after their dog and leave the poop bag on the trail. You made the effort to pick it up, but then you left the poop. So
Mhm.
this is my favorite piece of scat. So if you know it, don't give it away. My favorite piece, I have a piece of this sitting on my desk, all lacquered up. I would hope you know. So it's got a lot of fur in it. It's got some bone bits. And this one has a fold and a twist. It's very fancy. A fold and a twist. It's usually found on an intersection of a trail, on a log or on a rock, or sometimes on bridges. You might find this one. Used to mark their territory, kind of like coyote. You'll find those on trails a lot. This is weasel scat. So this is most likely, judging by the size and content, probably a fisher. So fisher are a large weasel that live in our area. And unlike the name, they don't eat fish, they eat small mammals. So this is very typical of weasel scat, where you have the fold and then you have the twist. Very fancy. How about this one? It's got some berries in it, some seeds from the berries, which, by the way, is great to spread seeds. Poop is a great fertilizer, and animals will eat the fruit. The seeds will come out. They spread it in the forest, and new plants grow. Unfortunately, that's also how invasives can spread. We get a lot of bear, raccoon. I'll give you another hint. This comes from the same animal as this. That is crayfish shell. Raccoon. Yeah, you're right. This is raccoon. Raccoon can be very varied. A lot of times, especially in the summer, you'll find them with seeds and berries, remnants of berries in them. Sometimes they'll leave it right at your door. And then this one was cool. This one I found at T-Town, right by the stream. Raccoons love to eat shellfish and mollusks. And so sometimes you'll find them with the exoskeleton in there. These are so cute. Poop can be cute. There's a big environmental clue on here. If any plant people know what this plant is. It is a caterpillar. Does any know what kind? It is milkweed. So the plant's milkweed. It's a caterpillar. Whose poop is it? Monarch. Yes, this is monarch poop. This is what I look for when I'm looking for monarchs, because if it's on the lower leaf, I'll look at the underneath of the leaf above it. And sometimes you'll find them that way. My mom always likes to know how I find the monarchs so fast. Well, I'm looking for their poop. And finally, something that we see almost every day. This is worm poop, otherwise known as soil. So poop is very important. Let's talk about bones for a second. Another one of my favorites, not quite as excited as scat, but bones are exciting. So when we look at skulls, we're going to look at the size. We're going to take exact measurements. This is more of a science. We're going to look at the teeth or the beak or bill, whatever they have, and any kind of remaining flesh on them, fur or feathers. There are a lot of ways we measure a skull, especially. We're going to look at skull length. We're going to look at the mandible, which is the lower jaw. Sometimes you find only the mandible. Sometimes you find only the top part of the skull. We're going to look at the orbital socket, which is your eye socket here, and your zygomatic arch, which is your cheekbone. We're going to look at our canine incisors, your premolars, and your molars, and if they have all of those or they don't. So those are just some landmarks. There are many other things we look at, but those are some big landmarks when we're looking at skulls. So this is one that a lot of people find out in the woods, and kids think it's a dinosaur. It's a pretty big skull. We have eyes that are on the side of its head. We have this huge nasal cavity here. So it has a fairly decent sense of smell. You have all these molars back here. It does not have any premolars or canines, and it has incisors up here in front. So you're right, this is a deer. Often we find it like this too. So again, you can just find the mandible out there, and there is nothing else that lives around here that's going to have a jaw this big with only molars in the back and these little incisors up there. But this is unmistakably a deer. We might also find deer in pieces. So you might not find a skull. The skull is the best way to identify, but you might find the femur and the tibia. You might find the vertebra. This is a rib right here. This is part of the pelvic girdle. Sometimes you'll find the shoulder blade. So you might find pieces of the animal. Again, if it's this big, it's most likely a deer. What about this guy? The eye is a little more forward facing, not really to the side anymore. It's got molars, it's got premolars, it's got canines, and it's got incisors. So it's got a little of everything. It kind of has an elongated snout. That's a big clue on this one. It's an elongated snout. And even though it has molars, there aren't that many of them. So it is built an omnivore, but looking at how many teeth it has, the premolars and the canines, it eats more meat than anything. This is actually a coyote. Opossums have slightly more molars and a huge crest, cranial crest that comes up here, very pronounced. This is a coyote. This one here, it has its incisors, its canines, premolars, and molars. Kind of a shortened nose, again, frontal facing eye. No cranial crest at all. This is a common one we get. This is a raccoon. So raccoon have the very, very teeth here, all the types of teeth, right? It's an omnivore, and it's going to have a flat cranial. So eye on the side, eyes on the side, eye hide. You have your molars, you have these wicked incisors here. And if you notice, you have 2 incisors on the bottom and 4 incisors on the top. And you have a huge sinus cavity. So this is an animal that has very good sense of smell, huge eyes. These eyes are really big. It's got no premolars and no canines, so it doesn't eat meat. It's an herbivore. But what gives this away really is those 4 incisors on top. Remember when I said rodents have 2 incisors on the bottom, 2 on top? This is a lagomorph. Lagomorphs had 4 incisors on top and 2 on the bottom. This is a rabbit. Not to be confused with the rodent. So this is a rodent. Again, the molars, the eyes on the side. This has 2 incisors on top, 2 on the bottom. And so this is a squirrel. What about this? There's not a lot of bone in here. And despite how big this skull is, look at its cranium here. There's not a lot of room for brains like there is in the mammal. And look at that eye socket. It's pretty big. It is a bird. This is a turkey. You can tell a lot about a bird by its beak, what it eats. So that, with that in mind, this beak is hooked. It also has this rigid structure in its eye to hold its eye in place so it cannot move its eyeball. And again, the eye is pretty big compared to the skull, so there's not much back there. This is a red-tailed hawk. So birds of prey have that hooked beak in order to tear the meat. Hopefully everyone knows what this is. Duck, yes. So the bill gives it away. This is a duck. Again, giant eyeball, eye on towards the side because it is a prey animal. This one's kind of interesting. A lot of kids think it's a dinosaur, which they're not totally wrong. This is a turtle. But this is usually not what we find. This is the skull of a turtle. We usually find this, the shell of a turtle. The shell of a turtle is actually bone. The inside of a turtle shell is their vertebrae, and those are the ribs going across. So their shell is a bone. When a turtle dies, its shell is left behind. Turtles cannot leave their shell like hermit crabs. But when we do find this in the woods, you can see that it is bone, and these scales that cover the shell are called scutes. They start to fall away. And now we have some other things. This is one of my favorites. I get very excited when I see this. We found one the other day with our mini camp, and I think I screamed. So one of my favorite things to do is go through this. You can see there's a lot of bone pieces in this. It's an owl pellet. So owl pellets are cool because owls cannot digest fur and bone. It actually sits in their crop, so it doesn't go down into their stomach, and you don't get, it's not vomit. A lot of people think it's vomit or poop, but it's not. It is its own thing, and the birds will make usually one pellet a day, and it'll be fur and the bones of what they eat. So you can dissect it to find out what it might have eaten. There's one particular barred owl at Teatown that I know where it lives, and I keep collecting its pellets, and it seems to really like shrews. A lot of shrew skulls in it. That's what it likes to eat. So all birds of prey will pellet, but only the owls will have the bones. So if you find a pellet and you're disappointed because there are no bones in it, it's probably from a diurnal bird of prey, like a hawk. They cannot digest the fur, but they can digest the bones. So it comes from just above the stomach, right below the esophagus and above the stomach, an area called the crop. So this is an unfortunate sight that we find a lot in the summer. It tells a story. This is two signs right here. The first sign is the eggs themselves. So these are snapping turtle eggs. You can tell because they look like ping pong balls. And you have a dig here. This is your other sign. It was probably dug up by either a coyote or a raccoon. How we know these aren't hatched eggs? Because you wouldn't have the dug up hole if they just hatched out. So this is a snapping turtle nest that most likely, judging by it, got eaten by raccoons. So I think the first question was, what was a gall? This is a gall. So a gall is a swollen or a exaggeration that happens, a swelling or exaggeration. Almost think of it as like an allergic reaction when an insect will chew away at either the stem or the leaf or the bark of a plant. The plant's reaction is to swell and kind of save the healthy part of the plant and provide this swollen mass to the insect. And the insect will in turn lay its eggs inside. And so this is from the goldenrod fly. It is very specific. Most galls are specific to a host plant. And so this is from the goldenrod fly. And you'll find these a lot now, especially in the wintertime where everything has died back and now these things are visible. Alternatively, you might find these in the winter. This one in particular is not one that I want to see, but it kind of has the consistency of styrofoam. This is a praying mantis egg case. And this particular one, unfortunately, is a Chinese mantis egg case. So one of our invasives. We have two invasive mantis and one native. Our native is the Carolina. So these mantis eggs, they are laid in the late fall and the parents die, the adults die. These will make it through the winter. They survive through the winter, and come spring, hundreds of little baby mantises hatch out. And it's survival of the fittest, who gets the food, who eats who. Praying mantises are well-known cannibals and will eat each other until there is one that survives or two that survive to adulthood. And the cycle begins again. They lay their eggs, they mate, they lay their eggs, come fall, and they die. And the eggs then survive. If you bring one, just a warning, if you do bring one of these inside in the wintertime, it will hatch early. It is driven by temperature. And so you bring it into a warm place and it's in the warm place for a couple days, they will hatch and you'll have hundreds of baby mantises crawling on your desk. Not like I've had that happen to me. So these are always exciting to find different kinds of molts or sheds. We have a chrysalis casing here. This is from a swallowtail. We have the exoskeleton of a dragonfly nymph over here. When dragonflies are babies, they live in the water. Comes late summer, they'll emerge from the water and break out of their exoskeleton here and emerge as what we consider an adult dragonfly, similar to a cicada, if you're familiar with cicada shells. And of course, my favorite, the snake shed. This is actually the inside out, right? Snakes shed their skin like we take off our socks inside out. Sometimes we just find fur or feathers that are left behind. There are whole books on feather ID. I won't go into it too much, but feathers are a great thing to find. Sometimes you find one or two here and there. Sometimes you find a pile of them. When you find a pile of them, most likely the bird got attacked. This is from a turkey. So this is a very common one that we find, the wild turkey feathers that a lot of people think are hawk feathers, but they're very beautiful. This is one that we find very often, again, in the wintertime. This is a bald-faced hornet nest that has fallen or broken apart. So you can see the different honeycomb shapes in here. If you feel it, it feels like paper, and that's because it has the same concept as it. So the bald-faced hornet will chew on plant material, mix it with their saliva, which has glue-like adhesive properties, and spit it back out as a paste that then dries into this paper-like material. Bald-faced hornet life cycles, similar to the praying mantis, they mostly die in the wintertime. The thing that survives is the queen. The queen will hibernate. All other bald-faced hornets die. Queen emerges in the spring, lays eggs, starts a new colony. And so if you have one of these nests up all year long and come wintertime, you want to take it down, feel free. The queen is not in there anymore. There's no one in there in the winter. What's cool about these, when you find them, they're in this big bulbous shape. They can be as big as my head, and you can lacquer it and keep it. They're pretty cool. So now some resources, and again, this is being recorded. So if you want a copy of it, there are many different books out there. I've just chosen some of my more favorite ones. The Peterson's Guide, very good. I highly recommend all of the Peterson guides. When they did the big update of their field guides, it really was something else. The Falcon Guide's okay. It's a little basic, but this one's good. The tracking handbook here, this one is good too. This is the old Peterson's. So you might see this around. This one is just a general good one for mammals, more for kids if kids are getting into it. This book right here, the Encyclopedia of Tracks and Scat, is my go-to guide, especially for scat. It's very, very good. This is a good read by Tristan Gooley, The Lost Art of Reading Nature Signs. It goes over a whole lot of different things. And then this one's okay over here. I prefer The Lost Art of Reading Nature Signs over it. This whole series right here is amazing. I cannot stress enough, if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of tracks and traces, these are the books you want. They're about $25 each. I highly recommend them. It goes over any kind of sign that you can imagine from in depth for all of them. And this is really so great. I do not have any bear prints or poop, but if you look over here at the mammal tracks and signs, this is bear track right here.
Okay. Thanks.
And as far as skulls go, these are my two go-to guides for skulls. I use them in conjunction with one another. This is a dichotomous key. So if you know how to use a dichotomous key, it's very helpful. And this one is the most comprehensive skull guide that I have found, with exact measurements, with exact dentation. So it will tell you exactly how many molars, how many premolars, how many canines, and how many incisors on both the mandible and the maxilla. And you can then determine what kind of skull you have. So these two, very good to work with one another. You do need a ruler. You will have to measure things. And finally, I leave you with my favorite GIF. This is Steve Irwin, and this is my spirit right here. I feel like I do this all the time when I'm out with camp groups. I do save poop and look at it later. So thank you guys for attending. I know there's a lot of information, and I tried to stuff it into an hour. It went over by 15 minutes. I do apologize for that, but there's just so much to talk about, and I could have gone into much more detail with everything, but I wanted to give you a more kind of broad overview of all the different kinds of stuff that's out there. Again, I highly suggest, if you see something out there that you don't know, take a picture of it, look it up, get some of those books. Those books are great. Of course, Signs and Traces, there aren't that many on iNaturalist. So if you do find something and identify it, post it on iNaturalist in those citizen science sites, because again, a lot of people just post the animal or the organism itself, but I've been trying to post a lot more signs and stuff like that. And feel free to email me too. I love to identify random things, and I always get a couple of those, and me and my coworkers sit at my desk and try to figure it out like detectives. So feel free to email me at any time. And I'll turn it back to Nadia, I guess.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alyssa. That was, I mean, as always, it's so much fun, but that one in particular is just a riot. And knowing you personally, I can attest to the fact that if you open one of the drawers in her office, you might find more than you bargained for, or maybe the freezer on a particular day as well.
Yep, I do have some in the freezer.
But I never fail to learn anything anytime that you start on one of these presentations. So I want to thank you a lot. And I see a lot of the similar sentiment coming through the chat here. Everyone seemed to have enjoyed themselves. If anyone has any questions, feel free to either unmute yourselves or type them in the chat. As a reminder, this was recorded and is being recorded, and it will be sent to you all afterwards for you either to review or for anybody that wasn't able to make it today for them to watch. And I just keep staring at this GIF here because I'm really thoroughly enjoying it. So yeah, of course, if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves right now.
There is one request from my father to sing the scat song. So I won't bore you with the whole thing. There are multiple verses of it, and I'm a horrible singer, but we have a scat song that we sing at camp. It starts with an S and it ends with a T. It comes out of you and it comes out of me. I know what you're thinking, but don't call it that. Let's be scientific and call it scat. I'll leave you with that for tonight.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye-bye.
All
Have
right,
a
and I hope
great
that
night.
everyone can join us again in 2 weeks for when Maggie talks to us similarly about birds and everything bird in winter. So I hope to see you all then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, and with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you for joining us.